Xiaomi's 12 Pro, their flagship model, finally gets its international release. Now, I did earlier in the year review the Chinese model, and it had a bit of a major problem for me. Thankfully, bit of a spoiler here, that issue has been fixed now with the global model, which of course they had to do, and I'm glad that they've done it. Now, this model, exactly the same spec of course, but now it has the global ROM on there. It's MIUI 13 based off Android 12. The phone specs, if you're unaware, well, it has a 6.73-inch screen. It's 120 Hz LTPO AMOLED, and we've got a Quad HD resolution with it. The battery capacity is 4,600 mAh with 120 watt charging. It does have 3 50 megapixel cameras on the rear. So one is 2x optical, the other is the main camera, and then finally an ultra wide, which is 50 megapixels too, all 3 of them there. And then the front-facing selfie camera is 32 megapixels. It has Gorilla Glass Victus and a metal frame around it. And in this review, I'll be covering everything in detail so you know exactly what to expect here out of the 12 Pro global version. Included in the box, you'll find our 120 watt charger, slightly larger than usual, but the charge time is nothing usual at all because it will fully charge it in around 20 minutes, the 4,600 mAh battery. Type A to Type C cable, and then you'll find our TPU case. There is a SIM tray tool there and a little bit of paperwork. Now this TPU case is a clear one and there are cutouts for everything. It covers the buttons to protect them and a raised lip around the camera module. Now the build quality of this phone is excellent. We have Gorilla Glass Victus on the front and the back, and the rear of it has this matte finish to it which looks excellent. Even in the sunlight it shimmers a little bit. The good part about it is no fingerprints, no smudges. The only smudges that do appear is on the alloy, which is around the camera module here. So very large main camera sensor you can see. Look at the size of that. And I do like the look of it. I think this camera module is looking a little bit better than others. Even though the 11 wasn't bad, the 12 Pro here I just think looks slightly better and just a little bit more simplistic in that design. So 3 50 megapixel cameras. 2 of them, which is the main, and then the 2x optical zoom camera have an f1.9 aperture, and then the ultra wide, which is also of course 50 megapixels, all 3 there, that one is f2.2. Now an interesting decision for them to go with a 2x optical instead of just using 2x digital zoom with the main and giving us perhaps 3x optical. I would have preferred, or even 4, but I think they're saving that, Xiaomi, for the 12 Ultra, which will probably have a periscope camera. Here on the right, you can see we've got our volume up and then power button. Now this is made out of metal frame around the outside. So it is a curved OLED screen on the front of this, which is an LTPO, 1 billion colors, 120 Hertz this, with an in-screen fingerprint reader. Now the location of it, not bad, and I can get to it easy, and the unlock speed on it is good. It's not the fastest I've seen. It's the animation really that makes it look sometimes a little bit slower, but it is accurate and no problems with it. We have a 32 megapixel camera here. You can see the bezels top and bottom are not the slimmest that I have seen. On the left, it's just the curvature to it, the metal frame again there, and in hand, it does feel good. Now, what about the weight of it? It's about 205 grams, so a little heavier than other phones, but it does feel solid. And then the thickness is approximately 8.2 millimeters, measuring here, just slightly over. Down the bottom, we have a Harman Kardon tuned speaker, antenna lines. Type-C port here is still USB 2.0 speed, so no USB 3.1, no video out. That's disappointing. In 2022, with their new flagship, I do believe it would have been the year. Perfect time for them to finally bring that in. Our SIM tray. Now, this does support 2 nano SIMs, so there is no micro SD card support. And up the top, we do have an IR transmitter. You can just see the Harman Kardon branding there. Secondary mic, and that is the speaker. Overall, great build quality, and you can see this model here that's on the left. No, Xiaomi did not send me 2 review units. This is the imported version that I did by myself. That's the Chinese model. The only difference is that the Chinese model doesn't have the CE on the back, okay, which they do need for the European model. Now, the screen that's within this is a really good panel. So it's LTPO AMOLED, 1 billion colors, 120 Hertz, Dolby Vision support, HDR10+, 1000 nits peak brightness with they claim a peak of 1500, which is really good, but I haven't been able to measure that. When I measure it, I'm looking at about 860 nits. That's with my meter indoors. So the blacks look very deep on this, as you can see, just state green colors, but that's obviously not green. That's the blacks. It's something wrong with the app there. And then it does have a curvature to the screen's glass, which is Gorilla Glass Victus. Now you can see at the top there, it shifts out from white to almost bluish because of that curvature. So I really wish it was a flat panel. And the other thing I wish it did have this QHD Plus screen is DC dimming. It sadly does not have DC dimming. So you do see a bit of banding coming through here, and if it had the DC dimming, we wouldn't see the banding, and those that are sensitive to pulse width modulation flicker would notice no flickering at all if it did have that option, but sadly does not seem to be available. I do hope with software Xiaomi can add it. Now the ROM on this phone is MIUI 13 that it is running. If you go into settings, you'll see at the time of me recording this review, which is just before the release, it is the latest version. Is it stable like it claims? For the most part, it is. However, I found that one of my SIM cards, which is a carrier here in Spain called Movistar, doesn't like it. It seems to end up trying to connect to 5G or flashes on and off, just even trying to get onto LTE band 20, and the phone ends up rebooting. It's very random, and it's very annoying. Xiaomi is aware of it, and apparently it's going to be fixed. There's a bug fix for that coming, and hopefully it's going to be out in time for the release. Apart from that, I have sometimes seen some animation slowness with slugginess of just when you first unlock the phone, especially if you haven't used it for some time. You go to unlock it. I have noticed this. You'd unlock and you see in the middle there a spinning icon for a split second, then everything all loads in. Now that shouldn't be happening. Some optimization to me is clearly needed. Android 12 in my experience has been a bit buggy. Gestures work really well. Swapping between your apps is very quick and everything is really fast. It's nice. It's got great performance, this phone. And I won't go through all those MIUI 13 features. I think most people know that and other features that MIUI have by now. So I don't normally go into that. But we do have a bit of bloatware with this. However, it's pretty good. Only about, 4, 5, 6 apps or so that come onto this that I would classify as bloat that you need to uninstall. It's very easy to do that. And our charge time. So their claim is around 19 minutes, Xiaomi. But it always takes me around 22, 24, 26 minutes here to go from 6% to 100. That is still very quick there for a 4,600 milliamp hour battery. It's fast, really fast, and just like their storage. So look at these random reads and writes there, especially that random write speed. There's going to be no slowdown whatsoever in installation of your apps here with this UFS 3.1 storage. So quick. And look at those sequential reads and writes. They are excellent too. So Antutu score, this almost hits 1 million points. It's very quick. Now this is a benchmark, so it's short burst performance. Long-term performance, the phone does get hot. It tends to throttle a little bit later on, although they've fixed it from what I had the experience with the Chinese version compared to now the same hardware, but with the global ROM, because you can see here with wildlife, this is the extreme test. It's a stress test, 20 minutes. This is one of the best results I have ever seen with this because it only throttles 0.4%. Basically, no throttling now, which is unbelievable. Why? Because the Chinese ROM version, it would do this. It just runs into overheating. In fact, it just recently happened to me again on the 7th of March. Overheats, it won't finish the test. But they have changed now the limit with the CPU. The skin sensor reading is a lot higher than when it's triggered. So it doesn't trigger the throttling and it just pushes that performance to the max. But it will get hot and I'll cover that later on with the gaming performance. You can see it reached 42 degrees. So it does seem that Xiaomi's done something internally as well to me to fix those thermals, to make them a little bit better there. And that's good to see. But really, awesome performance that, it didn't throttle really at all. It dips with the frame rate, but the other test showed us no. So Safetynet check, yes. Success here, passed everything, and that means that banking apps and all that can be used. It has NFC on board. Widevine security level 1. Netflix works in full HD. Amazon Prime Video does not. It's not an approved device, but that's Amazon's fault, and they are lagging behind on so many mobile phones and tablets that I cover from China. You got full camera 2 API level 3 support, so that means that you can, yes, find yourself a Gcam port or use open camera if you want a different quality or up the bit rate of video and things like that. With open camera, you can do that. GPS works really well, very good average signal strength there. So when it's in the green in the 30s, I'm happy, and the lock is very quick. It only takes a matter of seconds to lock onto that. Battery life, so at 120 hertz at the QHD resolution, it's not amazing. So this is a fixed test with the screen set to 200 nits of brightness, which is probably about the brightness level most people would be running when indoors. Certainly not outdoors, because you wouldn't be able to make out the screen. So it runs until it gets to 20%. That's the result. So 9 hours and 34 minutes is not the best that I've seen for 120 hertz. Even at QHD, I've seen much better than this. So that's realistically about 6.5 to 7 hours of on-screen time is the maximum that you'll be able to squeeze out of it. And that's about what I get out of this phone, which, is a little disappointing there. It is only a 4,600 milliamp hour battery. I wish it was a 5,000 milliamp hour one. That would have probably given us then a score here of just over 10 hours, and then on-screen time still of about 7.5. Audio quality now. So voice calls on this phone, fine. No complaints. It does have active noise cancellation. Now, if you want to use this, your 3.5mm tech, you're going to need that, which is a Type-C to 3.5 adapter. When you do that, it sounds good, the quality that comes out of it, and we don't even get the adapter included in the box, and it would have been nice if we still had that 3.5mm headphone jack, but sadly I think it's gone forever on these flagships, at least. How do those loudspeakers sound? So Harman Kardon tuned, they come out the bottom here, then out the earpiece. Very good, as you hear from this sample. They're great speakers, they've got a hint of bass to them, and the volume's good for a phone. Onto the gaming performance. So what I noticed with the Chinese version is it got incredibly hot. It started to throttle about 6 minutes into the game, and it would get that hot that it would close. It would give me an error. The one that I showed you before when we looked at 3D Mark, that would happen, okay? It would just completely boot you out of the game, close. Doesn't happen anymore now, so the global model has improved things. Maybe they made a tweak to the copper in here. The thermals seem to be a bit better, but I just think they've changed via software that limit now when it overheats. They've really increased it, so it doesn't seem to throttle down as much. Now, on the maximum settings here that I do have enabled, we're looking at, in town, around 50 to 60 frames per second. It sometimes gets down to 40, so there are some dips there. What I'll do now with Genshin Impact is just game. I'll get out of the town here, and I'm going to game for 1 hour, and I'll report back on the thermals, just how hot is it going to get. And with 1 hour gameplay, will it boot me out of the game like it did with the Chinese version? Hopefully not. Oh, and one last thing. I've slapped on the case here because most people would probably be gaming with a case on it. All right, it has been 1 hour. So this is the 12 Pro, the global version. We're looking at 43 degrees on the front of it. This is a huge difference compared to what I saw with the Chinese version. Now the back of it, 40 degrees. They've changed something. Xiaomi's clearly changed the thermals inside here because that is so much cooler. The other phone would overheat. And here it is, just to show you, look at the difference here. It's about 45, 46 degrees on the back of the Chinese version. And the front of it, oh, there we go. It's actually triggered the overheating message. So it's reaching about 47, and I've seen it get up to 48 and even 49 degrees. So big difference there between the global version and then our Chinese version. They've changed something. The internals, or maybe the Chinese version is just missing some copper in there. There is clearly a big difference. Something else has happened too. Because of the heat, you'll see that on the Chinese version, the lens is sort of fogged over, and you do see that when you go to record video. Whereas the model here, which is the global version of the 12 Pro, it's fine, it's clear. So again, there is something very different inside here, the internals of the Chinese version of the 12 Pro. But this is really good to see that Xiaomi has fixed my biggest complaint of the Chinese model in the global version. It's clearly the model you want to get. You do not want to import in this Chinese model because of its overheating. You can't play games on it after about 25 minutes. It just closes them overheating, and then that lens will fog up if you record 4K video or 8K for over 6 minutes. Moving over to our cameras now. So the front-facing 32 megapixel camera does have electronic image stabilization with your vlog footage, but only 1080p resolution, which is falling behind when you think about other flagships. They offer 4K with their front-facing cameras, and we don't get it here with Xiaomi. We still don't have it, and I really hope that this is going to be the year, 2022, that they finally add 4K front-facing vlog footage. So the rear camera with its 50 megapixel sensors can shoot up to 8K 24 frames per second. This is 4K 30, and it does shoot 4K 60. So right now the main sensor has optical image stabilization. The audio bitrate is only 128 kilobits per second. That's my biggest complaint with this video quality, that I hope they can improve the audio with it. So we have digital zoom. Now when you go up to 2 times, it doesn't swap over to that 2 times optical camera. It keeps using the main camera. However, when I go back on the zoom, it now swaps over to the ultra wide, which is good that we can do this on the fly, and the electronic image stabilization is good. Now I have noticed that sometimes when you pan around, you get that judder that comes through, and this is present in pretty much every single Android phone that I have reviewed. Always seems to happen that even though you try and take it real easy, real smooth, when you pan around, the judder comes through. So overall, for 4K quality, it is really quite good. It's just for me, the audio bitrate. I hope that Xiaomi can improve that and bring back the 320 kilobits per second we used to have. They still haven't fixed that issue with the bit rate, which is disappointing. So it's still low, 128 kilobits per second. It should really be what we had before, 320. They brought that in to only take it away. Doesn't really make too much sense there. What doesn't make sense to me either is, why do we still have just 1080p video with a front-facing camera? Look at everyone else. Their flagships, 4K. 4K 30, 4K 60, but not here. Now we do have 8K video recording with the main camera, and so far, well, at least in my testing, I'm not seeing the issue that I had with the Chinese model, that if you shot 8K or 4K video for around about 6 minutes in the cold that was, you'd get a fog kind of build up, a mist, something going on inside behind, condensation behind the camera lens, which made the footage all blurry. Not happening here, and of course they fixed the problem with the thermals. The original Chinese model that I reviewed would get up to almost 50 degrees Celsius. It ran into some huge problems where it would get that hot, and it still happens, that it would boot you out of a game or a benchmark and just close it down completely and tell you it's overheating. So GPS wouldn't work, the camera wouldn't work. It wouldn't want you to do really anything until it cooled itself down. But it doesn't happen at all now, so they must have made changes to the software to make it throttle later, but also a change on that limit, I think. So push the limits of it, but there must be a little bit more copper, or perhaps they changed their thermal compound they're using between the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 and then what is inside here to keep it all cool there. So that is good to see. Now the battery life for 120 Hertz is very average, okay? Especially at Quad HD resolution. You're looking at about 6.5 to maybe 7 hours of on-screen time. That's just social media, so Twitter, WhatsApp, a little bit of that, maybe streaming and YouTube and things, but not gaming. So a little disappointing there. I did find the standby battery life with MIUI 13 to be quite poor. Leave it overnight and you'd wake up without even using the phone to realize that you've lost like 25% battery at times, which is, wow, it's got a standby battery drain issue, MIUI 13. And then there is a few bugs too that sometimes, as I showed you, the UI can load in a little slow and show like an animation icon. That shouldn't be happening. And then a full reboot on my unit was one bug fix there. So plenty of bug fixes needed. They still need to iron out all those issues with MIUI 13, which I hope is coming. But it always seems to be the software that does hold up. Really brilliant hardware here from Xiaomi. So it's the same old, yet again, story here. Great hardware, just really the software there. So there's, of course, room for improvement. They can turn things around even more. And they certainly have when you compare this model to the original Xiaomi 12 Pro that I reviewed. So thanks a lot for watching this review. I hope to see you back in the channel. Bye for now.